explore business. But your facts are off. I was seized long before I went to Ireland.
The history book says that you wrote your famous discourse for a discovery for a new passage to Cathay, that's China,
I know it's China.
and that you wrote it in 1576. Now, that was after you came back from Ireland.
It was published in 1576. I wrote it, 15 years earlier, in the 60s. You see, what you have to understand is this, that anyone who was anyone in the court or scientific circles was only interested in two things: making a fortune by finding the secret of alchemy, turning lead or base metal into copper or gold, or making a fortune by finding a sea passage to the east, so that all those spices, jewels, gold and wealth that the Spaniards were bringing in every day in every ship could come to us. Well, you name them. There was Walsingham, John Dee, Frobisher, Drake, Carlisle. Oh, and of course, me. Seize a ship, they said. Find the passage. Your fortune would be untold.
What's that?
It's an astrolabe. The oldest navigational instrument known to man.
May I? Slowly.
Take a sighting of the sun with it. You have it upside down.
It's okay.
Dr. Patrick O'Flaherty is a Newfoundland writer and teacher.
I think the Elizabethan mind was obsessed by Marco Polo still, you know, and he had told the Europeans that there was a great land of wealth and beauty in the east, in Cathay, and in Cipango, that mythical island off the coast of Cathay, where roofs were inlaid with gold and where spices grew like weeds. And the initial attempt to move westward from Europe was an attempt to find this great source of gold and spice and power. Britain had nonetheless retained an interest in the northern parts of North America, because Cabot had taken possession of those parts for England in 1497. And Sebastian Cabot had, in 1508-9, tried to find a passage around North America. His idea was to go around North America to get to the spices of the East. It had failed. In 1527, there was another expedition to North America by one John Rutt with a similar idea to get around or to go through North America. And Gilbert was carrying on a kind of tradition that had already begun in English discovery. His discourse of a discovery for a new passage to Cathay, written in 1566, is in just this vein. It's a funny and preposterous book in some ways, although when you look at the map, you'll see that, in fact, there is a Northwest Passage. It's not too far out, and he does argue that there is such a passage, and of course he was right. He also proposes colonization of a sort. He thought it'd be a good idea to have a sort of halfway place between England and Cathay.
I took leave from soldiering in Ireland in 1566. October, I think it was. I came to London to see the Queen herself. I wanted to get her interested in my ideas and get a patent from her and some money, a great deal of money, so that we could make another search for the Northwest Passage.
And of course, you didn't get the money, and you didn't get the patent.
No, I almost lost my head for trying. Oh, she was a hard woman, Gloriana. Stubborn as a goat and miserable over money. Why, she would squeeze a gold piece for a week before she'd let go of it. I took the liberty of bringing with me my charts, Your Majesty, and the map drawn to accompany my treatise. It shows uncontestably that a passage to Cathay through the Northwest above America is both practicable and feasible, as you will see here. If we were but given the ship's majesty to make a strong attempt, in faith we could outdo the Spaniards in bringing home our cargoes of spice and silk before the year is out. And in America itself...
God's death, will you leave off about America? I am sick of hearing everyone praise of nothing but America. What of Ireland? Do we stand here day after day and dream of America while Ireland goes in flames and do nothing for it?
Ulster is at peace. The rebellion's put down.
Is that what your ears hear? The rebellion is put down. That is not what mine are told this very hour in council.
Ulster is at peace. O'Neill is...
You took leave without permission from a military command to come here and waste my time with dreams and fantasy. Oh, your ears need boxing as well as fixing, Master Gilbert.
Your Majesty, finding a Northwest Passage is not a fantasy.
Of course it is a fantasy. You are laughed at in some quarters, you and John Dee and the rest. Now, we have wasted enough lives and ships and money and years on such silly theories.
If the Northwest Passage is a silly theory, madam, then the planting of colonies in North America is not.
Oh, it's the planting of colonies now, is it?
We have sorely neglected our claims to America since John Cabot found it for us, milady. The only way to make it ours now is to settle it. If not, we will lose it by default and live to see the Spanish claim the entire continent. That is not a silly theory.
And may we live to see the Spanish claim Ireland if we neglect that? Is that a silly theory? They have supplied the rebels, plotted with the Pope. If they could land troops there, we could see an invasion of England. Is that a silly theory?
Overwrought, perhaps, madam, but not silly.
Overwrought? Indeed. It could happen if our supposed leaders such as yourself are off on voyages to America, ignoring what presses us at home. You would have us settle the new world and lose the one we have while we're about it? Is that it?
Of course not, Majesty.
Then go back to Ireland. If you must plant colonies, plant them there. And tend to the business that disturbs this realm, as you have sworn to do. And tell the other dreamers you sit about with to do the same. You have been among my friends since childhood, Master Gilbert. My true and trusted friends from Devon. We must have peace in Ireland, or it will be our ruin. I need a man I can trust to take charge. This work of trotting the bogs and marching the mountains is not suited to the English soldier. We must teach these rebels a lesson. Do this for us. And when you return, there will be time to talk of America.
Majesty.
Subdue the rebels he did. In 2 campaigns in the provinces of Ulster and Munster, Gilbert exhibited a viciousness and brutality that has seldom been equaled in the annals of empire building. He would lay siege to a castle like this one at Rathquail in Ireland, giving the inhabitants a 24-hour ultimatum to surrender or face death. Most of the time they refused. And this report from his second-in-command, a Captain Ward, records Gilbert's response.
Within 3 hours we won it. It put to the sword 40 persons, man, woman, and child. The colonel commanding me under pain of death to put them all to the sword. Oh, they accounted him more like a devil than a man, and are now so afraid of him that they did leave and give up 26 castles.
To strike further terror into the Irish, he was fond of making the rebel leaders who came to surrender walk a ghastly promenade to his tent.
His manner was that the heads of all those that were killed in the day should be cut from their bodies at night, and should there be set side by side of the way leading to his tent, so that none could come, but that commonly he must pass through a line of heads.
Gilbert's hatred of the Irish was unrelenting, even in triumph. As the rebellion finally collapsed and the surrendering chieftains came to plead for the Queen's mercy, he was fond of telling them,
Be quiet. My dog's ears be too good to hear the speech of the noblest man among you. You win.
The English commander in Ireland, Sir Henry Sidney, summoned Gilbert to his military headquarters on New Year's Day, 1570, and conferred upon him a knighthood for his outstanding service in the pacification of the country. His ruthless ferocity in murdering 40 people right here in this castle at Ballingarry had become a legend. 10 years later, Sir Walter Raleigh, in taking his turn in suppressing yet another uprising in Munster, longed for the stern hand of his half-brother. Would God, he wrote, that the services of Sir Humphrey Gilbert might rightly be sought. I have not read nor heard of a man more feared among the Irish. Dr. Kieran Brady is a lecturer in history at Trinity College, Dublin.
Now, much of the stories that we get of Gilbert's conduct in Ireland come from later reports, come largely from the chapbooks of that scribbler Thomas Churchyard, who was terribly anxious to spin a good yarn. So you don't have to believe all the atrocity stories. But this aside, there is still very convincing contemporary evidence that Gilbert did what he claimed to do, that he was ruthless in war, that indeed he enjoyed his work, and that he would have continued the ruthless killing of men, women, and children as long as he deemed it necessary. He had a very small collection of men, at most I would say about 500 men. He had to operate on a very restricted budget, and he had to operate in a fairly short space of time. So when Gilbert came to Ireland, he desperately needed to impress these people of his seriousness of purpose. The threat of the sword was only effective if occasionally the sword was used, and occasionally the sword was used. When he was attacking the Tower Houses, when he was putting man, woman and child to the sword, when he was, in short, behaving in this ruthless fashion, he was doing no more than beating the natives at their own game. Gilbert was a man of the Renaissance, a typical Renaissance figure, if you like. Articulate, well-read, an intellectual, man of ideas, but also a man of action, a man with the courage of his convictions, if you like, daring, ruthless, and brave. He may or may not have been a sadist, I don't know, but he was certainly quite a butcher. But finally, I think that the final impression that Gilbert leaves me with is less of the Renaissance figure, or less of the brutal man, than that of the loser. Almost everything he tried, every colonizing enterprise, the quest for the Northwest Passage, the chance to make a career for himself in Ireland, turned to dust in his hands. He was used by the Crown, in Parliament, in Ireland, let go off and take his chances on the high seas, and yet never received any public reward, any permanent job, any sinecure. He died a bankrupt. It's not quite tragic, this story of a frenetic, a brave, and ultimately futile career, but it is, it seems to me, extremely sad.
Even if the Irish could not, Gilbert easily rationalized his behavior in an era of brutality. No conquered nation will ever yield willingly their obedience for love, he said, but only for fear. He returned to England in the fall of 1570, tired of soldiering, but full of enthusiasm for a voyage of exploration to the new world that everyone was talking about. He set about gathering investors for the expedition and once again approached Queen Elizabeth for moral and financial support. This time he was successful. She rewarded him with a royal patent, allowing 6 years for settlement of the new territories and giving him almost exclusive title to their wealth and trade.
Know ye that of our especial grace we have given and granted to our trusty and well-beloved servant, Sir Humphrey Gilbert.
Pause. A pause. Look, I didn't leave Ireland in 1570 and set straight out for here, you know. A lot of water went down the Thames before that happened, laddie. You're missing a lot of important facts. For instance, I got married.
Well, it was about time. You were 32 years old.
That's exactly what Raleigh said. So I made up for lost time. I had 6 sons and 1 daughter in as many years.